The claim that Gandhi lived in India House in London in 1908, a claim that Savarkar, as you say, made on oath, was a lie.
Was a completely untrue. It's a complete fabrication.
Secondly, he also says, and again I believe he said it in the same statement and therefore on oath, Gandhi ji and myself lived together as friends.
No question. And friends, you know, in my book, friends, Gandhiji addressed everybody as his friends. He writes to Hitler also as my dear friend. But did Savarkar display any friendship towards Gandhiji? You should see the epithets that he used for Gandhi. Ke ye pagal hai for Gandhi. He said he's a walking plague, chalta phirta plague hai. That he gets fits of unreason in his brain. There are 2 pages. I've just reproduced what Savarkar said. Similarly, what Savarkar said about Ambedkar, they'll also say, oh, they were great friends.
But once again, we are coming to that same conclusion again. Whether we talk about the account of the escape from the porthood of a ship in Marseille, whether we talk about what he claims he said to Bose and how he advised and guided him, whether we talk about his claim that Gandhiji and he lived as friends or that Gandhiji lived in London in India House in 1908, those are all blatant lies. Savarkar was prone to untruth, and I keep calling those untruths lies, but Savarkar was lying.
And I choose to say that nothing survives scrutiny. The slightest scrutiny will show that these statements are just completely fabrications.
In other words, lies.
Yes, that's
You're reluctant to use the word lie because you're worried that Savarkar's followers or acolytes will turn on you. But the truth is, you have proven that what you call fabrications is in fact just a euphemism for lying.
Well, that's a euphemism, yes.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. We know who Veer Savarkar was, but what do we know about him? Are we well informed and aware of the truth? Or are we prisoners of myth and possibly even falsehood? For instance, did he worship cows or consider it an ordinary animal and abhor the practice of drinking its urine and eating cow dung? Did he stage a heroic escape from the porthood of a ship at Marseille in 1910? Or has that story been exaggerated, possibly even manufactured? And did he oppose and fight against British rule or seek to appease and please them? A book released later this week reveals answers you are probably unaware of and which will certainly surprise you. Here it is. It's called The New Icon, Savarkar and the Facts. And its author is the well-known BJP minister, editor, columnist, and scholar, Arun Shourie. Arun Shourie was the minister in Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. Mr. Shourie, let's start with aspects of your book that will shock Savarkar's followers, whilst possibly pleasantly surprising his critics. First of all, he wasn't a cow worshipper. You say he considered it an ordinary animal. And in his Marathi journal Kirloskar, he wrote, if the cow's mother to anyone at all, it's the bullock, not the Hindus. That will take a lot of people by surprise, won't it?
Well, actually, he was a rationalist in regard to our beliefs and practices. And he said, yes, the exact quotation is the cow is an ordinary animal like the horse, the dog, or the donkey. And it is useful. And so long as it is useful, it should be looked after. But it should not be worshipped. Gau palan ho, gau pujan nahi ho. And he ridiculed this to great extent and said, for instance, you were talking about cow urine, cow dung. He said, first at least find out, is there any scientific basis that yes, Arun has this particular disease, and for this particular disease, this is a good cure. There is none. But you are taking it for, And secondly, even if it cures your disease, how does it bring you punya?
Absolutely. In fact, he particularly abhorred the idea of drinking cow urine and eating cow dung. You write he believed it crosses the limits of madness to consider cow urine and dung as sacred and pavitra, to believe that eating or drinking it cleanses our soul, destroys our sins, and constitutes punya in this world as well as the next.
And he wrote,
He was
yes,
appalled at the thought of drinking cow urine and eating cow dung.
and the IIT director in Madras will be surprised at this. But you see, he says he wrote a series of these articles, and in one article, the cow worshippers were very upset. And they said that no, this should be banned, and the article should be banned, and so on. Our religious sentiments are hurt. He said, no. Sure, there's no question of religious sentiment. You are the ones who is destroying the quality and depth of our religion by such foolish practices. They said, no, but it should be banned. He said, I tell you what, I'll keep writing on this matter for 1 full year. And he kept writing for 1 full year. So he would not give up.
He was defiant. He wasn't just opposed and abhorred the idea of drinking cow urine and eating cow dung. He was defiant about it.
Yes, and several aspects of the cow. Worship is one. He said, it is your mother. He said, do you drink the urine of your mother? You have made it a super mother. Do you take her excreta and eat it? So you started by making it a mother, and you have made it a super mother. And these 35 crores who are jam-packed into her, what happens to them? And he gave several examples, which if we repeat it here, your viewers will get enraged of what's happening to those 2-3 fellows who are at the back, stuffed at her back, from which she excretes dung. So he certainly made absolute fun of it, saying that this is the way our culture and our religion is being destroyed by these foolish beliefs.
In fact, he wasn't against or even offended by beef eating. You write, he believed this was a matter not of religion, but of your stomach. He also argued, as you put it, if the cows of Bharat are so sacred, what is the harm of eating the cows of America, a country where they eat their cows in any case? Even something as critical as beef eating did not offend him, and he wasn't against it.
And yet, cow, not just beef, but pork. He said these things are decisions to take with consulting your doctor, not consulting any pothi, not consulting any priest. You should just consult the doctor. Does it suit you? Does it not suit you? And certainly, he gave the example of America, and he went further. For instance, he says that how these ridiculous beliefs that the Mughal armies or Muslim armies, when they came, he gives this example that they would put the Hindu armies came to combat them. They would put a string of cows in front, and then the Hindu soldiers would not want to kill the cows to advance on the Muslim troops. This is useless. And the example to follow is of Hari Singh Nalwa of Punjab, the general, that when he saw the cows being put there, he killed all the cows. And the troops then put cow blood into the grains, thinking that then the Hindus will not eat it. He then put pig's blood in their grain, that they will not eat their things. They starved. He killed the cows and finished them. He said, that's the way. Don't worship because of your worship for one animal, you you gave up the country.
Tell me, did this infuriate his followers? Because clearly the ban against eating beef is sacred to most Hindus. His attitude was defiant of them. Did this infuriate Savarkar's followers?
Well, I do not know about his followers, but certainly he was not one to give up. He then starts quoting the Manusmriti on these matters. And he says Manusmriti makes it obligatory to eat meat, to eat this kind of meat, this kind of meat during, for instance, Shraddhs, especially for the Brahmins to eat it, the ones you have called for worshipping. That is the way your parents and your grandparents and sisters will be assuaged for 1 week with this kind of meat, with 5 weeks for this kind of meat, forever by this kind of meat, and so on. So he made fun of all this.
Now, in your book, you also debunk the claim that he heroically escaped from the porthole of a ship in Marseille in 1910. This was a myth propagated in a book you believe he wrote pseudonymously, and also a myth that was later extolled by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. For those who don't know the details, why don't you both briefly recount the myth of his so-called glorious escape and then tell us the truth of what actually happened?
You see, in December 1909, a magistrate in Nasik, a man called A.M.T. Jackson, was killed. And the pistol with which he was killed was one of 20 that were smuggled into India. And the police found that it was Savarkar who was instrumental in smuggling them from Europe into India. So Savarkar was arrested in London and was being brought back in a ship from London, and it had berthed in the dock in Marseille on the 7th of July in 1909. So the myth, as you will see by going, it's not only Mr. Bajpayee, but everybody, and I've given the example of Mr. Bajpayee, saying that even with Mr. Bajpayee, you can go to the YouTube, the viewers can go, and the website is listed there, and they will see Mr. Bajpayee extolling Savarkar with this, that, and the other, and then he says that he battled the stormy seas and the, great waves that were coming at him because of his great commitment to freedom. What had happened was the ship was berthed. Savarkar one morning said, I need to go to the toilet. He went there, and from the porthole he jumped. And then he said to have battled the stormy seas. He comes onto the shore, he runs, he's caught by a French policeman, 2 policemen who were sent from Bombay to escort him back, also catch him and bring him back into the ship. Now the fact is that there were no stormy seas. It was a steamship which had been berthed there for what is called coaling, putting coal into it. You don't take coal in small boats to a ship far away. It was right there, and the distance was just 10 to 12 feet. And the 2 policemen, you see, if Savarkar battled the great waves, then those 2 policemen would also have had to battle the great waves. Nobody has even alleged that their clothes were wet, because they just ran down the gangway and joined the pursuit and caught him and brought him back on the same gangway. So it was just 10 to 12 feet. And this fact, just one sentence, this fact is actually published by the government of Bombay in 1956 in a collection of documents called Documents Relating to the Freedom Movement of India. But we don't read. So the myth goes on and on.
So the truth is that whilst he did escape from captivity, it was nowhere near as heroic and certainly not as miraculous as we've been led to believe.
It was certainly a heroic deed to try to escape, but it is the legend which has been built up and which he seeded in that particular book called The Life of Barrister Savarkar, which many people believe he himself wrote, and the publisher himself says that Savarkar, this man who wrote it, Chitragupta, was none other than Savarkar. That certainly gave rise to this. This is one of the many myths that he propagated.
Now, your book also reveals that Savarkar propagated yet another myth. He made grand claims about his relationship with Subhas Chandra Bose, which simply weren't true. Savarkar claimed he advised Bose to escape from India, to form the Indian National Army, and then to declare the complete independence of Hindustan. This will come as a big surprise to the audience. Can you give us the details? What exactly did Savarkar claim?
You see, there was a group that he had set up called Abhinav Bharat, said to be a group advocating revolution. And when winding it up after India became independent in Pune, because then he had just been discharged from the case on the assassination of Gandhiji, he thought it's better to wind up any group propagating violence. So in 3 lectures on 3 days in Pune, he made this claim that he's the one who gave the entire blueprint, in a sense, to Subhas Chandra Bose when Bose came to meet him um, uh, after meeting Jinnah. Now, actually speaking, he says, escape, go to Germany or elsewhere, set up an INA through the POWs which Germany has and Japan has, bring them either from the Bay of Bengal or from Burma, and I will prime the Indian people. They will rise in revolt at that time. The Indian army, which I would have stuffed with Hindus, and put fire into them, they will refuse to fire on the INA and will turn their guns on the British. British will be sandwiched and will go.
All of this, Savarkar claimed he had advised Bose to do.
Yes, in 3 lectures he claims. It's not just an offhand. He gives this whole thing. And this has been built up and built up by his modern day acolytes or bhakts. And the fact of the matter is that this is just not true. Bose himself has described that meeting in his book called The Indian Struggle. And he said he just devotes half a paragraph. He says, I met Jinnah. You see, Bose had been removed from the presidentship and had to resign from the presidentship of the Congress. He is trying now to say how to bring about Hindu-Muslim unity. For this, he meets Gandhiji, he meets Panditji, he meets Sardar Patel, he meets Jinnah, he comes to Savarkar. How to do it? Then he says that Jinnah and Savarkar were just not interested at all. They were only interested in Jinnah in getting his Pakistan, Savarkar in getting some things for his followers in Hindu Mahasabha, and therefore nothing can be expected from either the Muslim League or the Hindu Mahasabha.
In fact, as your book points out, in his writings, Bose was almost dismissive of Savarkar. He wrote, and I'm quoting, Mr. Savarkar seemed to be oblivious of the international situation and was only thinking of how Hindus could secure military training by entering Britain's army in India. In other words, he was dismissive of that meeting. He didn't at all believe that he had been told and advised and was still given a blueprint about what to do. None of that seems to be true.
Not only that, he says, and the next sentence in Bose's book is, from these interviews, that means meeting Jinnah and meeting Savarkar, the writer, that is himself, was forced to the conclusion that nothing could be expected from either the Muslim League or the Hindu Mahasabha. And there was no point in pursuing this at all. And then the facts are there. It's not just the recollections of two persons. For instance, Bose does escape. It's a plan of his own. He has been interested in military affairs since his childhood and has been arguing within the Congress that we must seek the help of other powers opposed to Britain. So he escapes. He makes his way to Germany. Now, the India League, the Free India League that had been founded in Germany from the POWs, had been founded much earlier than the time that Bose reached. And Hitler had great contempt for that team of Indians. He said they are a joke. Then it takes Bose 1 year to get an appointment with Hitler, and Hitler puts him in a submarine, say, go to Japan. And he advises the Japanese not to come to Burma and India. He tells them to go to New Zealand because he thinks a white race should not lose to a brown people.
But you know, the interesting thing that your book establishes is that Savarkar was...
Just on one small point. The founding of INA had also started 2 years earlier. And there is no record at all of the Indian troops defecting to the INA regiment when they were contesting. In fact, they beat them with the same hammer that they used to beat the Japanese. And this is all in Srinath Raghavan's very authoritative history of the wars of India.
Absolutely. But the point that I want to stress for the audience, because I think it's the important point that emerges from your book, is that Savarkar was prone to telling lies. He exaggerated to the point of lying in that book that he wrote pseudonymously about his escape from a ship in Marseille, The Life of Barrister Savarkar. He lied about what he had allegedly said to Bose, how he claimed he'd advised Bose to form the INA and to revolt against the British. In other words, Savarkar was manufacturing stories about himself.
Yes. But lies, people will start swing. But he was a myth maker.
But what's the difference between a myth and a lie?
Well, and the myths that he says that actually we must write to a purpose, and the purpose is that which will serve the objective of bringing about a Hindu Rashtra. His whole history writing is like that. His personal story is like that.
But the important thing is what you call myth making and what I'm calling lies are the same thing. He was manufacturing stories about himself which were not true.
Yes. And that, for instance, in the trial of assassination of Gandhiji, he says, Gandhiji and
I'll come to that later. Let's take this step by step. Let's not conflate everything together.
Certainly.
I want now to move to talk about Savarkar's attitude to Hitler. Your book shows that he was not just an apologist for Hitler, but he was often an admirer of Adolf Hitler. You write, and I'm quoting you, the more Hitler seems unstoppable, the more news about what is being done to the Jews in Germany comes out, the more fulsome does Savarkar's acclaim become for Germany, in particular for Hitler, most of all for what is being done to the Jews. And then you say that Savarkar believed this was the way to weld a nation. This is how we should treat the Muslims. That's pretty reprehensible stuff, isn't it?
Yes, but that is true. And you see, it is because you can see the chronology of the war and his own speeches, which are recorded and published by his own followers in 1938, 1939. Just on the eve of the war, he's saying we should remain neutral. Hitler has done such good for Germany. Who are we to say anything? Hitler knows better what is good for Germany, not this Nehru. All this. And at that time, all evidence of these things is coming out. But he doesn't. Actually, he does. And in fact, there is evidence, and this has been reported by a very famous Italian scholar, of his making contacts with the German agents in Bombay. His people making contacts and saying, see, this speech of Mr. Savarkar applauding Hitler, can it be published in Germany? He wants that these speeches should get to the eye of people like Hitler. And in this, he is not just doing reprehensible things, he is ignoring the contempt that Hitler had for Indians and for what Hitler called these Indian revolutionaries roaming around Europe.
Let me point out what I think is the most shocking thing you reveal. You say the more news about what is being done to the Jews in Germany comes out, the more fulsome does Savarkar's acclaim become. And you say that acclaim was most of all for what is being done to the Jews. They were being massacred. There was a Holocaust going on. 6 million died brutally, mercilessly, and Savarkar was applauding that.
Yes, and before the massacres, all these things like the Nuremberg Law and all these things had been done, and the Jews had been thrown out. Their shops and houses had been broken into, businesses taken over. They were excluded from civil service, from practicing law, from all the Jew judges were fired. People were removed from the universities. All that was being published, and by the Nazi press as great achievements of the Nazi regime. But here we have the Hitler, and Savarkar's point is, who are we to say that these people are, that Hitler does not know what is good for Germany? See the progress he has brought about.
This
And
is an aspect of Savarkar that will come as a big surprise to Indians, that the man actually applauded Hitler's treatment of the Jews.
well, what to say? That if they are surprised, then actually the reason people are surprised is I have not found a person here, a few authors apart, I'm sure, who have read what Savarkar wrote. And these are published things.
You know, side by side with all of this, Savarkar was also.
If I may say, no, just one point. It's not just Nazis, it's not just Jews. It was the Nazi ideology, which was the racialist ideology prevalent in much of Europe in the early 1900s, in 1920. And for instance, in his book it's called the Six Glorious Epochs of Indian History, Savarkar applauds two what he calls Hindu republics. So one sentence about their democratic institutions. But mainly he applauds them for their practice that any child born was examined again after birth, 3 months after birth, and if he was found defective in any way, he was killed on the spot, mercilessly, no exceptions allowed. This is eugenics of the Nazis.
And Savarkar was applauding it when he believes it was happening in some Hindu republic.
Yes, it's in the book. I quoted those passages, and it's in
So Savarkar actually applauded Nazi ideology.
In this particular sense, yes. And of course, of a strong government and so on. For instance, if you want to take up the question of his saying...
Let's come to that later. Let's come first to Savarkar's bizarre attitude to the British. Because side by side with his applause for Hitler's ideology, with his applause for what Hitler was doing to the Jews, Savarkar side by side was also begging, that's the precise word in your book, begging the Viceroy Lord Linlithgow to induct the Hindu Mahasabha into the Viceroy's Executive Council and into the War Council. Despite the hypocritical defiance of his public posturing, Savarkar made every effort to pander to the British and make himself and the Mahasabha acceptable to them. Again, it was a two-facedness. One face for the Indian public who were being shown defiance, another face for Linlithgow, the Viceroy, to whom he was appealing, begging, as you put it, for membership of the Executive Council and the War Council.
I should not appropriate the word. The word begged is used not by me, but by Linlithgow. Linlithgow, you see, Savarkar is now, what happens is, Savarkar, in 1939, the Congress ministries resigned. They were in several provinces. Savarkar sees an opportunity. So he starts approaching Linlithgow, the viceroy, writing letters, and then he meets him. And Linlithgow, as these British people were very meticulous, makes a record and sends it by cable, secret cable, to the Secretary of State looking after India in London, in the British government there. In that, he says in one of his things that Savarkar came to see me and so on, and he begged. Linlithgow says. Then second time, he said, and he begged. And he comes to a great, he's very surprised that Savarkar, who has been saying we must have complete independence, and that Abhinav Bharat, his group, was the only one and the first one to proclaim the ideal of in full independence. He is now saying that no, just a few verbal adjustments that are required. Sir, your statements are completely all right. That is enough. And then he gives up this idea for a dominion status. Then he gives us this idea of you announce dominion status and say, no, you do it after the war. Then he says any time, any reasonable period after the war. He keeps diluting this in every meeting.
The point you're making about dominion status is another very important point, because at that time, Congress was demanding complete independence. Linlithgow reported to London in 1940 that Savarkar and the Mahasabha were quite content with dominion status since they recognized that nothing else was practicable. So once again, Savarkar's stand on what he believed was the appropriate future for India was markedly different to the Congress one. Congress demanded complete independence. Savarkar was quite content to accept dominion status, and Linlithgow recorded that as Viceroy.
And not only that, uh, he called the Congress, while he is, in Linlithgow's words, begging him, not my word, Linlithgow's own words, for seats, as you said. He's writing articles and giving speeches calling the Congress heroic beggars. These heroic beggars. Not only that, it's not just dominion status. He says dominion status declared now. Then he says after the war. Then he says a reasonable period after the war. And he says just this, because there is so much opposition to what he is.
So his position kept changing.
And it resulted in great revulsion among the people. And then he started saying, oh, there is this great storm, and Sir, Your Excellency, Your Lordship, can you please just make a few verbal adjustments to your statement?
And your book points out that what Savarkar was saying to the Indian public,
yes,
a mood of defiance, a mood of resilience, a sort of determination that he was showing the Indian public is very different, if not the opposite, to what he was showing to Linlithgow. To Linlithgow, he was trying to please him, to appease him, to be on the right side of the British. To the Indian public, he was suggesting he was being defiant. In other words, there was a hypocrisy.
But there was certainly these two faces to him, and this led to a great problem for him. And he, therefore, in subsequent speeches, was always trying to justify and to find rationalizations for these dilutions and for somersaults. And he said, in politics, you have to be cunning, and don't worry, have faith, we will outdo them in cunning. He has to explain this all to the public. And that has not gone unnoticed by Linlithgow and by the director of the IB, Pilditch, and others. They say, no, the man not reliable. So he loses on both sides.
Now, although Savarkar was a great
excuse me, just one point, that this is not one statement, it's not one letter, there's not one meeting. It is a thing that lasts 2.5 years of correspondence and meetings. Again and again, these dilutions take place, and again in public, he's saying something else.
Quite right. As you said, two-facedness is the best way of describing it. One face for the Indian public, a completely different face for the British Viceroy.
And then he starts recruiting soldiers for the British Army. And that, again, leads to great opposition among the people and among his own followers. And he said, no, I'm trying to induct Hindus into the British Army so that they will get this military training. And at the right time, they will pounce on the British and outnumber the Muslims and so on. So those
quite
are
right. None of which ever happened, but you're quite right. Now, although Savarkar was a great opponent of Mahatma Gandhi and was accused of involvement in his assassination, in the statement that Savarkar made in his own defense, he made completely false claims about how close he was to Gandhi. And these were, I say, blatant lies. He said Gandhi had lived in India House in London in 1908, adding, Gandhiji and myself lived together as friends. You have a whole chapter in your book where you prove that this simply isn't true. It's just a lie.
Yes. Firstly, Gandhiji was not in London at all in 1908 at all. He was not there in 1907. India House was set up in 1905. Gandhiji comes there in 1906. He spends one night in India House, says, no, this is too far. I have come here to represent the South African case, Indians in South Africa, to the British authorities, and this is too far and remote. So he moves to a Cecil Hotel. You will know, I don't know, but he moves there. So 1906 is not there. Then he doesn't come in 1907, he doesn't come in 1908, he comes in 1909. And they could never have stayed together. Why? 10 days before Gandhiji came, a man called Sir Curzon Wyllie, the ADC to the Secretary of State for India, was killed by an Indian, an understudy of Savarkar, a young boy called Madan Lal Dhingra. Gandhiji was revolted by this murder because these people had called this Wiley to a function they had organized, and there Dhingra shot him point blank. It was regarded as a great revolutionary deed. Gandhiji wrote against it, he spoke against it, he was furious. And on Savarkar's own telling in that book, that India House now became the center of suspicion. And it was under constant surveillance by Scotland Yard, including the street on which it was. So Gandhi could never have stayed there. And Gandhi didn't stay there.
And yet Savarkar claims he did. So Savarkar is lying.
On oath. That is a statement, a written statement on oath. It's not a casual statement to the magistrate or the judge.
But it's a lie. It's a complete, blatant lie.
And I've just taken 5 sentences from that long 90-page statement and examined each by the contemporary evidence and record. And nothing comes out to be, as I have mentioned, nothing survives.
I'm repeating myself again. The claim that Gandhi lived in India House in London in 1908, a claim that Savarkar, as you say, made on oath, was a lie.
Was completely untrue. It's a complete fabrication.
Secondly, he also says, and again, I believe he said it in the same statement and therefore on oath, Gandhiji and myself lived together as friends.
No question. And friends, in my book, friends, Gandhiji addressed everybody as his friends. He writes to Hitler also as my dear friend. But did Savarkar display any friendship towards Gandhiji? You should see the epithets that he used for Gandhi. Ye pagal hai for Gandhi. He said he's a walking plague, chalta phirta plague hai. That he gets fits of unreason in his brain. There are 2 pages. I've just reproduced what Savarkar said. Similarly, what Savarkar said about Ambedkar, they'll also say, oh, they were great friends.
But once again, we are coming to that same conclusion again. Whether we talk about the account of the escape from the porthood of a ship in Marseille, whether we talk about what he claims he said to Bose and how he advised and guided him, whether we talk about his claim that Gandhiji and he lived as friends or that Gandhiji lived in London in India House in 1908, those are all blatant lies. Savarkar was prone to untruths, and I keep calling those untruths lies, but Savarkar was lying.
And I choose to say that nothing survives scrutiny. The slightest scrutiny will show that these statements are just completely fabrications.
In other words, lies.
Yes, that's
You're reluctant to use the word lie because you're worried that Savarkar's followers or acolytes will turn on you. But the truth is, you have proven that what you call fabrications is in fact just a euphemism for lying.
Well, that's a euphemism, yes.
Okay. Finally, let's come to Savarkar's views about democracy. He didn't believe it was suitable for India. He wrote, and I'm quoting, in India where the voters are ignorant and do not know whom to vote for, and the elected representatives are also selfish, I would not recommend democracy. I would support any other form of government that would suit the interests of the Hindu nation. And then he goes on to say, I would not mind if we have a one-man government so long as he makes India strong and powerful. To my ears, that sounds like a justification for dictatorship.
Because he was that way. He was a dictatorship. Many of these people were minded for strong government headed by one person, not for what he called this eunuch type person, Nehru. But there's even more fundamental thing. It's not just a democracy in the abstract. You can trace that to the fact that he was completely knocked out every time his candidates were knocked out again and again in the elections. In 1937 elections, there are about 1,540 seats and Hindu Mahasabha gets 3. In 1945-46 elections, again 3. And one of them actually, Mr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee on his own. But the more important point is, it's not just the democracy. It is he repudiated the constitution, much more comprehensive, which is the foundation of democracy in India. He said this Constituent Assembly is completely a British creation, and therefore what it has produced is not to be accepted. National flag can never be the flag of Hindu Rashtra. It will be the Gerua. So the national flag, the national emblem, constitution, and the form of government, yes, completely repudiated.
But the particularly shocking thing, and I'm going back to quote from Savarkar so that the audience know it's not you who's saying it, it's Savarkar himself who said it. He said, and I'm quoting, in India where the voters are ignorant and do not know whom to vote for, and the elected representatives are selfish, I would not recommend democracy. He did not want a democracy for an independent India.
Yes, that's certainly the case, because he felt that we need a strong government to face up to these great enemies within and outside. And if I may make a further point, in the matter in which he was completely correct, for instance, he was a great fighter against caste system. He said, "Ye Rakshas hai." These followers of his, these people who are invoking his name today, are fanning the same casteism to destroy our democracy further in every election. But they keep taking his name. So he was not for it, and his followers are further repudiating democracy by repudiating Savarkar's teaching on this fundamental matter of caste.
Now, your book also has pages and pages revealing what Savarkar meant by Hindutva and what impact that Hindutva would have on India. It's your conclusion that I find particularly striking. You write, it's not a Hindu state which will be established, but an Islamic state in saffron. The Hindutva state becomes an Islamic state sans Islam. In other words, what he wanted was very similar to an Islamic state that we've seen, but without Islam. All the rigidity, all the fundamentalism, all the lack of democracy would have been there. It's just that Islam would have been missing.
But actually, more than that. Because, you see, firstly, the definition of Hindutva is, as Dr. Ambedkar pointed out, only to exclude Parsis, Jews, the small, but Muslims in particular. We can go into that, how he defined it in such a way that you exclude them. Then he has various, in his books, there are various things that he praises and holds up as examples. I have a chapter there called the Sutras for a State. And those sutras are, for instance, that we must be super cruel, super revenge. If the enemy has slaughtered, or you believe that the enemy has slaughtered, let's say Tipu's armies have slaughtered Hindu women and children, you must have a wholesale slaughter and you must rape the women. All this he writes. He says this is the proclamation that should have been given to the Maratha troops. So super cunning, super cruelty, super revenge, all these things become then the values of the new state. So what will that state be except the Islamic state as he reads it? And I have pointed out in the
book, what you're saying is that if he had come to power, it would have been a disaster for our country.
No doubt on that. No doubt on that. And those who are speaking in his name today or building him up, they have not read and reflected on the values which he was propagating. And my view, therefore, has been, please look, 2 points. First, look at what's happened to Pakistan. Nearby, they started by persecuting the poor, small, little community called Ahmadiyyas, then went for Shias, then went for people within the Sunnis, then set up terrorist groups among the Sunnis, then the state gets involved with those terrorist groups, and where it is. And what are the issues with which Pakistan has been preoccupied with? We should learn from that. Second thing is Hinduism. Hinduism's essential point is the inner directed search. It is of Buddhism, it is of Jainism, it's of all Indic religions. But this Hindutva is all about exhibitionist religiosity and badgering other people in the name of religion. That's why my second plea has been save Hinduism from Hindutva.
Absolutely. You end your book with that note, and it leads me to my last question. When you wrote this book, was it simply Savarkar that you were debunking? Or were you also, as you hinted a moment ago, revealing the truth about the views of his modern day admirers? People like Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, were they in your sights as well?
No, not Amit Shah, but certainly Mr. Modi and Mr. Mohan Bhagwat and what is happening today in our country. That is what led me to the roots of these beliefs. You beat up a small little bangle seller in Indore and you think you are promoting our religion? You beat up some small little girl or you rape a pregnant woman, Bilkis Bano, and you say that's Hinduism? Pilgrimage was such a noble thing. Diane Eck, a great scholar, a lover of India, in her book about pilgrimages in India, he says, India has been defined by the footfall of its pilgrims. And today, pilgrimage is becoming religious tourism. And full page ads on that with Mr. Modi's picture and the Chief Minister's picture. So it will destroy it. So it is not just that I want to tell these people they are doing something wrong. I really, through you, through your listeners, want to appeal to Mr. Modi, to Mohanji, who's making sometimes very important statements and suggesting moderation. Please, before you build up such characters in the minds of your followers, read what he said, reflect on the consequences of what he propagated and what ruin it will do to our country and to our religion.
Absolutely. And I'll remind the audience of the most important things you've said. Savarkar was no cow worshipper. He abhorred the idea of drinking cow urine and eating cow dung. He wasn't offended by beef eating. But the other equally important thing that you point out is Savarkar fabricated, to use your euphemism. He told untruths, to use your second euphemism, about his escape from the porthole of a ship in Marseille, about what he allegedly advised Bose to do, about his relationship with Gandhi. All of those, as you put it, were fabrications and untruths, what I call utter lies.
And he's being built up to date for the one purpose. One is Hindu business. Second is to erase Gandhiji.
And yet, what he said about Gandhiji was a lie, that we were friends. They were not.
Of course.
Arun Shourie, thank you very much indeed. Once again, I will hold up your book. There it is, The New Icon, Savarkar and the Facts. It's a book that for Savarkar's followers will be enraging. For Savarkar's critics, it will probably produce a very self-satisfied smile. Thank you very much for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Karan. As always, you are one of our educators.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.